You let me know when.
Yep, you're all set.
Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to have you with us tonight. There's going to be a lot of information for you. So hopefully you have a pen or pad or some type of note-taking item so that you could capture all the information that we have for you tonight. We are welcoming you to Alpha Kappa Alpha, Iota Lambda Omega's chapter of our chapter workshop on #CAP. We are preparing you for college. And so whether you are going next year or the year after, you are at the right place tonight, because tonight we're talking about the whole financial part. Okay, and I know that there are a lot of questions. I'm a recent mom of a college freshman, so I still have questions, and it's been a year. So we have an expert with us tonight that I would like to share with you, share her biography with you, so you know exactly who we're dealing with. She has a wealth of experience and tons of knowledge that she's going to pass on to you tonight. And hopefully you'll have some questions that you can ask in the chat, and she'll be able to send you in the right direction for those questions or give you the answer to those questions herself. So my name is Pamela Foster, and I am the facilitator for this evening, the moderator. And we have our guest is Tamika Bybee, and she is a higher education professional with 20 years of experience of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Tamika has a well-rounded knowledge base within enrollment services because she has worked in records and registration. She has worked in veteran services. She's worked in student accounts, that's the big one, and financial aid at various colleges and universities in 3 states. That would be Ohio, Virginia, and our own home state here of Maryland. Ms. Bybee currently serves as the Director of Financial Aid Services at Howard Community College, right here in Columbia, Maryland, where we are located. And she's also worked across almost every sector of higher education, which includes a 2-year community college, a large 4-year public university, a large 4-year proprietary university, a large 4-year online global university, and a small 4-year Catholic college. So you see, she has a wealth of information for us tonight. In addition to her higher education experience and over 13 years of leadership experience, Ms. Bybee is also the published author of Hey Sis, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, a Black woman's guide to navigating the professional workplace. I'm going to be going on Amazon once we get off of here tonight. She loves that her career affords her the opportunity to not only mentor young Black women, but to also be able to help people from all different walks of life achieve their educational goals through financial literacy and mentorship. So I am so happy to present to you and introduce to you Tamika Bybee, who will take over from here. Enjoy the session.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Pamela. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to get started and share my screen. We're going to jump right on in. Let's see. All right, so this presentation is essentially Financial Aid 101. I'm going to go over with all of you some of the basics of higher education, financial aid, and just give you some of the tools that you need in order to ensure that you are getting the most money that you can possibly get once you get to the college of your choice. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on in. First, we're going to talk about the rules of the road presentation etiquette. I encourage everyone to please ask questions in the chat box as we move along. Please do not be afraid to ask questions because your question may be somebody else's question. And don't hesitate to take notes to refer to later. And I also have created a nifty little financial aid FAQ for you guys to utilize after this presentation. It kind of just sums up this presentation and a nice little neat little bundle for you to be able to refer to. What I'll do is once we get into the presentation, I will periodically stop and take a look at the chat questions and answer. So go ahead and send those questions over there to that chat box. All right, so this is just an overview of what the presentation is going to be, the different topics that we're going to touch on. We're going to first talk about, where do you want to go, choosing your school, and we're going to move on to, can I afford college? Like, what is the cost of college nowadays, which is completely different from, when I went to school many years ago. We'll then move into what is financial aid? What are the different types of financial aid that you could possibly get to pay for your tuition and fees? And then we're going to talk about some of the financial aid lingo. We often use in the financial aid world, we often use various different acronyms. So, to somebody who does not live in that world, it can seem very confusing and it can seem like we're speaking a different language. So we're going to talk about what an EFC is, what SAT, what FAFSA is, like what does any of that even mean? I'm going to decode the financial aid language for you. And these are some of the basic acronyms and terms that we use. We're going to then move on to how and when to apply for financial aid, just getting started. And then after you submit the FAFSA, what happens after that? Like, what is the process? I just want to try to demystify that for you all, because a lot of people think that in these colleges, like we have a safe behind us and we just go in and pull the money out and it's right there, and it just doesn't work like that. It'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't. So just going to give you a little back end process of what happens after the FAFSA is submitted. Then we're going to move on to some tips and resources that I've created for you guys, and then the Q&A. All right, so first thing is, before you even think about financial aid, you need to decide, like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And the reason why I say this is because you can't get financial aid for everything. So for example, say you decide, you know what, I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time in college. I just want to get like a little certificate, maybe do an apprenticeship of some sort, just something like really, really quick, bam, boom, boom, I'm done in within a year, maybe year and a half. And that's all well and good. But as far as financial aid is concerned, you may not be able to get federal aid. So there are a lot of regulations and stipulations attached specifically to federal aid. One being that you have to be in a degree or certificate program. And in order to get federal aid, you have to also, or the program has to be at least 16 credit hours. So hypothetically, let's say you enroll into a certificate program, it's only 12 credit hours. That program specifically, the total program is 12 credit hours in total. We can't give you financial aid or federal financial aid for that. So that's why it's important that you decide first, like, what is it that I want to do? Do I want to go to a community college? Do I want to go to a four-year university? Do I not even want to go to a community college and want to, maybe go to a career college or whatever? Those are all things that you need to consider and think about before you even start the financial aid process. So the next thing that, we need to consider when we decide, you know what, I know now what I want to do. I want to go to, let's say I want to go to a four-year university. I'm pretty clear on my career path. I know what I want to do. So the next thing that we have to talk about is cost. For some people, cost may not be a factor. Some people had very, involved parents who, had their savings account or their 529 plan set up right when their child was born, where there are other people who, maybe due to various different circumstances weren't able to plan for something like this. And so when it's time for, college, like there's no money, or there's, very little to work with. So we want to think about, cost. I think sometimes when, students, they graduate from high school, it's just like, oh, I'm going to go to college, and, they don't foresee any possible barriers that could possibly hinder them from going to the college of their choice. Certainly don't think about the financial aid or the financial aspect of it. So that needs to be a consideration. You want to think about, are you strictly going to be using financial aid? You don't maybe come from a family that may be considered low income or working class, and there just is no extra money for college. You want to think about, am I going to have enough aid to cover those charges? Sometimes people, they are eligible for aid, but it may not be enough depending on whatever school that they're trying to go to. And then we want to think about, what is my plan B if I can't get into, or if I can't afford my top college? So say, somebody wants to go to like a Johns Hopkins or a Case Western Reserve University, which is a lot of money. And regular federal aid is never going to be enough to cover private colleges. You want to think about a plan B and have that backup college in place. And then you want to think about, well, what can I do to minimize my costs? And further along in this presentation, I'm going to give you guys some tips on what you can do to possibly minimize some of your costs that you will incur with a college education. And so just over here on the left-hand side is an average annual cost, just to kind of give you guys a ballpark figure of what you're looking at as far as the different types of colleges. So obviously you can see Howard Community College, along with the other community colleges here in Maryland, super, super, super cheap, $5,000 annually, that's the average. And then as you move up from, to a public 4-year, and then to a public 4-year out of state, and then private college, you see it just slowly inches up, and it jumps once you move from 4-year in-state to 4-year out of state. And that's the other thing I think people don't necessarily think about when, it's time to start applying for colleges, is the out-of-state tuition is completely different from the in-state, and you're going to pay to go out of state. And then also too, a lot of times with out-of-state, depending on the state, they will give priority to their residents over out-of-state. So that's when the plan B kind of comes into play. So not only, what happens if you can't afford your top college, particularly if it's out of state, but what if you don't get into it? It may not be a situation where, maybe academically, they're great academically, but like I said, depending on the state, they will give preference to their residents. And so they may only admit like a small percentage of out-of-state students. So the next thing we want to talk about is affordability. So this goes hand in hand, obviously, with the cost of college. We want to think about, what's the most economical, or where can I get the most bang for my buck? And I know a lot of people, and honestly, it's a societal pressure and a societal push that, it's like, I remember when I was in high school, and my guidance counselors never even brought up the possibility of a community college. They pushed the 4-year, that's where you need to go. I never had discussions about Cuyahoga Community College. That's the community college in Cleveland. It was always, well, look at Ohio State, look at Kent State, look at Central State University, never the community college. But again, if cost is a factor, then we definitely want to, do a comparison. And we want to take a look at what are the different annual tuition and fees and room and board costs associated with that college. And so here in this little diagram I put together for you all, just something quick and dirty that gives you the annual tuition and fees and room and board costs associated with some local colleges as well as an out of state. So obviously, again, you can see right now, Howard Community College annual tuition and fees is $4,000. There's no room and board because we don't have dormitory housing. But then when you move up to Morgan State University, which is considered a public four-year institution, that jumps, that doubles essentially to $8,000 plus the $10,000 for room and board. So you're looking at $18,000 that you're spending annually to go to college. And then of course, Towson, UMD. But then when you look at Johns Hopkins, which is a private institution, $57,000, and that's just for tuition and fees. And then when you add the room and board on there, that's an additional almost $17,000. And then when we look at out of state, the out of state cost, it jumps compared to in-state, $8,000 to $10,000. If you decide I want to go to Ohio State, I want to be a Buckeye, you're going to pay $43,000 essentially to go out of state if you are a Maryland resident. And so what I did though, is I wanted to show you guys real quick, it's going to navigate me away from the presentation, but when you are comparing the colleges and you're looking at all of these different factors, there's a nifty little tool that you can use through College Board, and it's called it's a College Board Compared Colleges tool. I'm just going to click on it real quick. Let's do that. And so when you go to it, you can essentially just put in the colleges and it will compare these various different colleges for you. I mean, you can do a Google search. I also have it on my FAQ for you guys that I'm going to give out. So that website will be there for you to utilize. But let's just put in, let's say Morgan State.
Tamika, we can only see your slides if you're presenting.
Oh, all right. Let me stop the share real quick. Let's share it again, but I'm going to pull up. Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Compare colleges. Awesome. Okay. So I'll put in Morgan State, and then I'm going to put in, let's say, Penn State. Let's just do that one. And then let's say Case Western. So you up to 3 colleges you can put in here and you can compare them, and it will give you obviously the location, the type. So I put in 2 public schools, although one is out of state, and then a private not-for-profit that's out of state too, that's in Ohio. But what it'll do is it gives you like nifty little facts and figures that can also help you in your decision making. So, it shows the total number of enrolled students, and then it talks about the admissions process. That's another thing that you have to think about. Sometimes, depending on a school, they can be very, very selective, but it tells you the requirements in here, and then it gives you costs and aid. So it's a really helpful little tool, just something for you guys to utilize when you're trying to make that decision on what school you want to go to. Now, let's go back to the presentation. All right. And so moving on into like, why even does a college education matter? Now, obviously, there are so many different outlets that you can utilize now to make money. It's certainly not what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. People are, utilizing social media as a means to make money with their YouTube channels and, becoming influencers, and, people have more access to knowledge because of the internet, which is, completely different than how it was 20, 30 years ago. However, with that being stated, even with all of that, it still makes a difference, like your college education. So based off of 2015 numbers here, it kind of gives you just a quick overview of what you can expect to make based off your education. So you can see from somebody with just a high school diploma, the average earning is $35,256. But once you earn a bachelor's degree, that jumps to almost $60,000. So it does matter. I just think people have to be informed and they have to be deliberate in their decision making on how they want to go about doing it, so that way, it doesn't end up being, the degree doesn't end up being a burden, particularly with student loan debt, which we'll get into a little bit later. So the next thing we're going to talk about is exactly what is financial aid. And quite simply put, financial aid is simply various types of funds used to assist students and their families with paying for college. And I am going to go back. Just want to check real quick. Nothing in the chat box. All right. So before we actually start talking about the various different types of financial aid, I want to demystify some of the language that we use in financial aid and just equip you guys so that you understand what it is somebody is talking about, like when you're talking to that financial aid counselor or when you get financial aid documents. So this is a list of some of the frequently and more commonly used acronyms in the financial aid world. So obviously we have the FAFSA, and that is an acronym. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. We also have something that's called an ISER, which is an Institutional Student Information Record. So when a student completes a FAFSA and it's submitted, it goes to the Department of Education. The student will get what's called a SAR, or a student aid report. And that SAR essentially will let students know what their EFC is, which is the expected family contribution. It may also tell them some other things. It may say you need to contact your financial aid office as there are, some other documents or something that you may need to submit. So that's what the SAR does. But when that FAFSA is submitted and the student gets the SAR, the institution gets the ISER, or the Institutional Student Information Record. So it's the ISER and the SAR. The student gets the SAR, the institution, the financial aid office gets the ISER, the Institutional Student Information Record. What that ISER tells us is what the student's EFC is, which essentially lets us know their Pell eligibility. But it also tells us a few other things. For example, if the FAFSA is rejected. So typically what happens in a reject is a student may submit the FAFSA and they're considered a dependent student, but for whatever reason, they didn't get their parent to electronically sign off on it. That's going to be an automatic reject. And that ISER lets us know that. It also gives us a few other little tidbits of information. But primarily, we use that because it lets us know if we need to collect any other documentation from the student. So then we also have UEH, Unusual Enrollment History. I just talked to a lovely student today regarding this. This particular student was selected for Unusual Enrollment History. So when a student submits a FAFSA, this is something else that comes back on the ISER. And what this essentially means is that the Department of Education is flagging this student. And the reason being is because whenever somebody is flagged for Unusual Enrollment History, or UEH, it's because they've attended multiple schools over the past 4 years. And this was implemented roughly around maybe 2015-ish. And the reason why the Department of Education implemented this was to combat fraud. They found that there was a lot of fraud pretty much running rampant in the financial aid world, with students just enrolling in schools just to get the financial aid, and then they would leave essentially. So that is the reason for the Unusual Enrollment History Review. And then we have things like SAP, Satisfactory Academic Progress. And that is essentially a standard that is a student has to meet each aid year in order to keep their financial aid. The set standard for most schools is a student has to maintain a 2.0 GPA, and they have to maintain a 67% completion ratio. And what that means is, let's say a student enrolls in, I don't know, let's say they enroll in 4 classes. They enroll in 4 classes, and then they end up dropping 2 of those classes. Well, at that point, they're only meeting a 50% completion ratio. The standard is that they have to meet 62%. So if a student is not meeting that 62% completion ratio, what most schools will do, at least for the first semesters, will put them on a warning status. Let's say they go back and do the same thing, then more than likely their aid will be restricted or suspended, and they will have to appeal to get their aid back. And that's a standard. Now it varies based on the colleges, particularly with community colleges. The 67% completion ratio is like if you've earned at least 40 credit hours, but it may be less than that if you have only earned, let's say 15 credit hours. The completion ratio may only be 50% at that point. It really just kind of depends on the school, but at least for most 4-year universities, the standard is 2.0 GPA and 67% completion ratio. So I talked about EFC a little bit, which is the expected family contribution. This is a number that is kicked back after you submit a FAFSA. And underneath in parentheses, I have student aid index. And the reason being is because with the 23-24 FAFSA, the EFC is going away and it's going to be called an SAI, student aid index. And it has a completely different set of rules and regulations attached to it. And the Department of Ed is still giving us information on how this is going to work, because obviously it's going to be a complete, huge overhaul for our system to change everything from EFC to student aid index. But for right now, the EFC is still there. And essentially that's the number that you get after you submit the FAFSA. You'll find that on the SAR, the student aid report, and it can range anywhere from 0 to 50, 60,000. And that's just a number, and they call it expected family contribution, but that's a number that they use in their calculation to determine how much a student is eligible for in Pell Grant funds. So the next thing is the NSFDS, the National Student Loan Data System. So this system is essentially what we use in financial aid to see a person's or a student's financial aid record, particularly their loan record. We can see every school that they have received loans from. We can see every school that they've ever received Pell Grant funds from. We can see if they've been over awarded in their financial aid and loans or Pell Grant. We can see a whole lot of stuff on there, but guess what? You guys also have access to NSFDS. There's the student, so there's an administrative version and there's a student version. So let's say you've taken out some student loans, you can log in with your FSA ID, and that's what you use to log into the FAFSA to complete that. But you can log in there and you can see your whole borrowing history, and you can see who your loan servicers are. And that's very important. It's a little kind of off topic of what this presentation is, but I say that it's important because in recent news, if you guys are keeping up with things in the financial aid world, especially with this, public service loan forgiveness situation, there's been quite a few servicers that have come out and they're like, we're done. We don't want to service student loans anymore. So logging into that NSFDS system and, looking at your history and seeing who your servicers are, and keeping track of that is very important, because historically, when servicers are switched, sometimes records are lost, especially amounts owed, particularly with payment records. So you want to see who your servicers are, log into those servicers and download those records and keep it for safekeeping. And so then I'm going to move on to R2T4, my favorite topic and everybody's favorite topic, not really, but return to Title IV. And that's essentially what R2T4 stands for. So Title IV is federal post-secondary funding. It's under Title IV of the Higher Education Act. So that's why it's called Return to Title IV. But essentially what that is in order for you to receive federal aid, you are required to, again, obviously maintain satisfactory academic progress, but you have to earn that aid. So the government just doesn't want to give money, just make it rain for no reason. Like they want to see that you are earning it, meaning that you are successfully completing the classes and earning a degree. So what happens with the R2T4 is, let's say you enroll in, your first semester or whatever, and you're enrolled in 4 classes and something happens, life comes at you fast, and you decide, I can't do this, I'm dropping all of my classes, I'm going to withdraw from everything. Let's say you've already received aid. Well, Department of Education comes in, they're like, well, wait a minute, what did you earn? Like, how long did you attend? We want to know how long you attended, because we want to see how much aid you actually earn based off of how long you actually, based off of your last date of attendance. So what happens is when somebody drops all their classes, the financial aid office, they have to review that student's record and they have to determine how much aid that student earned based off of their last date of attendance. So whatever they did not earn, well, let me back up. If they did not earn at least 60.1% of that aid, then at that point we do a return to Title IV calculation, and we determine the unearned amount, and then we send it back to the Department of Education. Now, obviously, this will result, for the most part, in a balance to the school, because there's still tuition and fees that have to be paid. The tuition and fees don't go away, but your aid went away because we had to send it back. So that's essentially what return to Title IV is. So I always encourage students, if they run into any problems, always talk to first their academic advisor, and then before they make the decision to drop, speak with a financial aid counselor so that they are aware of the ramifications of that. All right, so in the chat box, do you file the FAFSA if you know your parents make a lot of money? Absolutely. You absolutely file the FAFSA, even if your parents are multimillionaires. File that FAFSA. And the reason is because while you might not be eligible for any federal aid, that doesn't mean that you won't be eligible for state aid or for institutional aid. And a lot of times we require various different schools do things differently, but a lot of schools will still require that FAFSA because we use that EFC to determine need. And that's a different calculation, but we use that in awarding institutional aid. Or also too, it could be that we're not necessarily looking at the EFC per se, but we use it to see who didn't get any money. So we might look at it and say, oh, this student wasn't eligible for any aid. So we have some institutional aid over here. We're going to go ahead and give them something to help them out. And then with the state aid, I know with the state of Maryland, it's required in order to receive any state aid that you complete a FAFSA or a MISFA. A MISFA is for undocumented students. And not all of state aid is contingent upon like what your need is or what your EFC is, but you still have to submit it. So absolutely submit that FAFSA. I know a lot of people think, oh, I'm probably not going to be eligible for anything, so I'm not going to submit it. That is the wrong attitude to have. Go ahead and submit it, because there's other aid out there outside of federal aid that utilizes the FAFSA for the aforementioned things that I just talked about. Let's see what else we have in here. Since I already filled out the application when it first opened, when can I view how much I'll be getting? So, and that's from London. That varies. It depends on the school, depending on when they actually start importing the ICERs and when they start packaging. Typically, if you are, let's say you're a high school senior and you're starting next fall, you probably won't see anything until probably, you should see something by March of next year. A lot of times, we try to get people awarded fairly quickly because the high schools, they pressure us because they want to be able to brag and say, look, our students, we our students are getting, 5 million or 30 million or whatever it is in scholarship funding and, this amount in financial aid. So typically you'll see awarding happen around the early part of the year. So I'd say by March, April at the latest, maybe. Let's see, but you know what? I'm also going to show you guys later on how you can kind of determine possibly what you'll get in Pell Grant. I'm going to show you that later on in the presentation. Let's see. Can a student flagged as UEH get financial aid? If they are denied financial aid, at what point is it possible to receive aid at a later date? So the first part, can a student flagged as UEH get financial aid? So it depends. There are two different UEH flags. So there's a 359 flag and there's a 360 flag. I don't want to get too far into the technical weeds with you guys, but the 359 flag is kind of like the lesser of the UEH flags, meaning that let's hypothetically say a student, there's a scenario where a student is attending Howard Community College. And let's say maybe they attended another community college last year, and or maybe they attended another community college like a couple of years ago. So now they're at Howard Community College and they have, they're eligible for loans and they're eligible for a Pell Grant. And let's say they earned some credits. That 359 flag, we have the authority at the school to just go ahead and satisfy it because we see that they've earned credits. Some schools don't necessarily look to see if they've earned credits for the 359. They may just go ahead and decide to satisfy it for whatever reasons that is within their power to do so. So that's a 359 UEH. Now with the 360 flag, that's a completely different ball game. We don't have carte blanche to go in and just satisfy it. With that, we have to get the student to submit their academic records to us, unofficial transcript to every school that they attended within the past 4 years. And if they did not earn any credit at any of those schools, then an appeal commences, which they have to explain like why they did not earn credit at all of these schools that they went to. And then they have to support, they have to submit supporting documentation to support their claims. If they can't do that, then no, they don't get financial aid, unfortunately. It can be reinstated at a later date. So hypothetically, let's say, they didn't, because of UEH, they're no longer getting financial aid. They couldn't get through the appeals process. If they attend for a semester and they are able to successfully complete their classes, depending on the school, most schools will then, after they have successfully completed a semester with them and paid out of pocket or through some other method of payment, most schools will then reinstate their aid for the next semester. If you are the guardian but not parent of a student, can the student file the FAFSA or does the guardian have to use their income? So when you complete the FAFSA, there's a set of questions. They're called dependency questions, and that determines whether a student is dependent or independent. One of the questions on the FAFSA is, have you ever been in legal guardianship, at risk, homeless youth, served in the military? I think there's another one, I can't remember. But all of these are dependency questions. So if you answer yes to any of these, including that you have been in a legal guardianship, then the student is independent. And at that point, they're not required to include guardian income. And it will tell them that. It'll say you're not required to. However, if you want to, you can, but it's not a requirement. And then it'll move you on into the other part of the FAFSA. Now, with that, though, I will tell you there is another flag that happens. So if somebody says I was in legal guardianship, somebody had legal guardianship of me, a lot of times what will happen is with that flag, then the financial aid will request documents actually, showing that legal guardianship, which is super simple. You just You know, a lot of times, depending on the financial aid office, you can upload the documents or, you know, stop by the office and drop by the paperwork to show the legal guardianship. All right, let's see. Is it okay for a current 12th grade student to apply for the FAFSA now? Absolutely, you should. The FAFSA became available on October 1st. You want to do it as soon as possible. And the reason being is because a lot of schools have priority dates. And that priority date is in place because we have certain aid that's limited. It's a set amount. So if you apply by that priority date, and let's say hypothetically you're Pell eligible, the Pell eligibility, it's there. Like, that's not, regardless as to when you complete the FAFSA, if you're eligible, you're going to get it. But attached to that is a SELG, which is a Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. That is considered campus-based aid and is a set amount. We only have so much to give. So if you apply by that priority date and you are Pell eligible, then you will get SELG. Different schools do different things and they have different priority dates, but most schools have that priority date in place for that reason. I am a junior in high school. Can I start applying for FAFSA now? You can, but it's not going to do anything, honey, because being a junior, like, you're not going, like, you can't be a high school student and get federal aid, provided, I mean, depending on your age and the dependency questions, but typically, like, it's not going to do anything. Like, if you just wanted to practice, you can, but you're not going to college in the fall. Or if you are, let me not assume, let's say you're a junior and for whatever reason you're going to graduate early, then yeah, you could go ahead and you could submit a FAFSA. It's not going to hurt anything though. But if you're a junior and you're still going to be in high school next fall, doing the FAFSA now is not going to do anything. When you complete the FAFSA, it's available October 1st every year. When you complete it, that's determining your aid for the next fall. Let's see. When does the FAFSA application for current 12th grade students opens? It's already open. It opens every year on October 1st. And we're going to get into that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that further into the presentation. Good questions. Thank you all. All right, let's move on. Check the time. All right, so now we're going to jump into different types of aid that you can get. So there are grants, there's scholarship, there's work study, and obviously there's federal loans. Some of the scholarships may be merit-based or they can be performance-based. Either way, it's free. You don't have to pay it back. Same thing with the grants. That's free money. You do not repay that to anybody. Work study is federal aid. However, you get a job most of the times on campus. And when you get that job on campus, we are required to work around your academic schedule. So with work study, you're awarded a set amount, like maybe $4,000. And you're paid that with each paycheck up until you reach that $4,000 mark. And then of course, there's the federal loans, and that does have to be repaid, unfortunately. So this little chart right here is just a nifty little screen that we put together. And it essentially just kind of gives you an overview of the different types of aid that you could possibly get in college. So there's federal aid, there's state aid, institutional aid, and then there's private aid. So in your federal aid category, you have the Pell Grant, the SELG, that's the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. You have the Teach Grant, which is for people who want to go to school to be teachers. So they don't give those at two-year community colleges because we don't have teaching programs, but you'll see that at the four-year institutions. And then we have the federal direct loan programs and then federal work study. And then we have state aid, particularly here in the state of Maryland. We have the Promise Scholarship, the Senatorial and the Delegate Grants, the EA and the GA, the Guarantee Access grants. And then we have institutional aid, which is money that the college itself puts up for students. And that can include anything from college grants to foundation scholarships and also institutional work study. And then we have private aid, such as private scholarships, bank loans, alternative loans. That's the private aid. So in this little chart, anything that's in green is free money. So you see there's a lot of free money for students to go to school. But then, the red, that's the loans that have to be repaid. And then under here, while my current position, I don't manage veterans educational or military benefits, I did in my previous role. So at the previous school where I worked, I was the director of financial aid and veteran services. So I was a veteran certifying official there, but in my career, I've been a veteran certifying official for probably combined maybe 10 years. So another source of aid, particularly for the military families, are military educational benefits. And so some of the most commonly used military benefits are the Chapter 33 post 9/11 GI Bill and the Chapter 35. The Chapter 33 post 9/11 GI Bill can be transferred. So if you have a parent who served in the military and say they could be active duty or they could be separated, it doesn't really matter. And they are Chapter 33 eligible, they can transfer that benefit, whatever is remaining, to their child for school. With Chapter 35, that is for students who have a parent who became completely and totally permanently disabled while on active duty, maybe unfortunately lost their life while they were active duty, or was considered missing in action. So the difference between the two is with Chapter 33 is that money comes directly to the institution and it will pay off your tuition and fees. With Chapter 35, that's essentially a check or almost like a stipend that's mailed directly to the student. And then they have to take that money and then pay their tuition and fees. So the next type of aid that we have, which we kind of hit on with the previous chart, is the direct loans. So there's three different types of loans. So federal loans, you have the direct sub loan, direct unsubsidized loan, and then you have the direct plus loan for both parent and student. The parent plus loan is for students, for a parent who has a dependent student attending college and they take the loan out for their child. Then there's a grad plus loan, which is for somebody going to grad school and they're taking a loan out for themselves. So with the sub and the unsub, the key difference between the two is that the subsidized loan is subsidized by the government, which essentially means that once that loan hits your student account, interest does not accrue on it. So while you are enrolled at least half time or 6 credit hours in undergrad, interest will not accrue on that subsidized loan. Now, with a direct unsubsidized loan, that is not the case. With an unsubsidized loan, as soon as it hits your account, interest starts accruing. So if you absolutely positively have to take out a loan, you always want to steer on the side of the subsidized loan. And that goes for the plus loan too. Interest starts accruing on that as soon as it hits your account. And so then we have federal versus private. So we just went over the federal loans, direct, unsub, sub, and plus. We also have private alternative loans. And you can get those loans from Sallie Mae. They have a Sallie Mae Smart Option Loan, and this comes from a bank essentially, or a private entity, not from the US government. The difference between the two, there's a big difference. So with the federal loans, you have various different benefits available to you, such as economic hardship forbearance. So once you graduate, if you just can't pay those loans, you can't afford to, you can request an economic hardship forbearance, no question asked, and they'll put you into a forbearance and saves your credit. While you were in school, it automatically, at least 6 credit hours, your federal loans will automatically go into an in-school deferment, meaning you don't have to make payments while you are enrolled at least half time. And then also too, there's a public service loan forgiveness program. If you are employed in a public service capacity, then you can apply for public service to have your loans forgiven after you've made 10 years of payments. You don't get any of those things with a private loan. Sometimes they will, they might allow like a forbearance or, of some sort, or maybe a deferment of some sort. But for the most part, you don't get any of those benefits. And then also too, with the private loans, the interest rates are usually a whole lot higher. So those are some things to consider. Typically, I tell people to completely stay away from private student loans, but I see people taking those out, particularly when they are trying to go to a private school like a Johns Hopkins, because that $57,000 price tag, federal loans and federal aid, all the federal aid in the world is not going to cover that. So that's typically where I see people taking out private loans. So the next thing is we want to avoid drowning in student debt. So this is the way that we can do it. We can choose direct cost. What that means is, when you go to a school, you can say, well, you know what, I need these loans, or I need to take out a federal loan, but you know what, I'm only going to take out just what I need. I'm not going to take out any extra. I'm not going to take out my full eligibility. So when you do direct costs, it's taking out just enough to cover your tuition fees, books, and maybe, a little gas money or some bus fare or something. Choose a subsidized loan. Again, the subsidized loan does not accrue interest while you are in school. Choose your school wisely. Opt for an in-state public school versus a private school if you can. And then only use loans as a last resort. Exhaust all other options before you decide to borrow. And just to put things into perspective for you, we are now at 1.5 trillion in student loans. It has wrecked a whole lot of lives because once you default, the US government will put a lien on any property you own. They will take your taxes every year until that loan is paid off. They will garnish your wages and your credit score will suffer. So there's never a reason to default because there's so many different things that you can do to stay out of default, but limit borrowing is the best, course of action. So how do I apply for financial aid? You apply for financial aid by completing the free application for federal student aid, which is the FAFSA, and you go to studentaid.gov. That is the hub of everything, essentially. If you're an undocumented student, you want to do a MSFA because while you are not eligible for federal aid, you are eligible for state aid if you're undocumented. And then for institutional scholarships, you want to look at your institution's webpage and it will direct you to their application process. And then for private scholarships, there are a list of services where you can create profiles and they will send you scholarships, private scholarships that you may be eligible for. So some like FastWeb, College Board, Scholarship Isle, Central Scholarship Org. These are all trusted websites that you can go to create a profile. So when should I apply for a FAFSA? Every year, October 1st, the new FAFSA is available. Do it as soon as it opens. Again, because there are priority deadlines, you want to get that application out there as soon as possible so that you can get all the money you possibly can. With Maryland State Aid, it's applied by March 1st, but I would just say, go ahead and submit that FAFSA October 1st. Don't wait until March. Get it in there quick. With undocumented students, the MSFA opens up October 1st as well. So if you can't submit a FAFSA, go in after October 1st, submit that MSFA. For institutional aid and scholarship applications, again, you want to check your school's webpage and they will give you instructions on what you need to do to apply for that institutional aid. And don't sleep on the institutional aid. Howard Community College, we have over $4 million in foundation institutional money. And we end up every year with a whole bunch of money left over. We just roll it over because people just refuse to apply for some reason. They just don't want to do it. So now that you submitted the FAFSA, now what? What happens after the FAFSA? So remember when I said, people think we have the little money in the safe and we just go ahead and apply it, and that's just not how it works. This is how it works after you submit that FAFSA. So the student submits the FAFSA, and then they add the school codes. It's important that you add the school code because that will get the FAFSA to the school that you're trying to go to. So after you do that, the Department of Education processes the FAFSA and sends an ISER to the school. Remember, that's the Institutional Student Information Report, and that lets us know what you're eligible for, or if there's some other things that you got to satisfy. So the next step is documents needed are produced based on codes from the ISER. So we get what's called C codes from the ISER, and those C codes tell us if a student is selected for UEH, if the FAFSA is rejected, if they're selected for verification. So the department, they randomly select people to verify the information that they put on their FAFSA, and that process is called verification. So it tells us that. And then once the needed document is in place, the student receives a communication from the school notifying them of outstanding items. So at that point, once we have the codes in place, we reach out to you and say, hey, you're selected for verification. You need to submit A, B, C, and D. And then the student submits the documents, the financial aid office reviews, and then we award. Sometimes it's not that cut and dry. We might have to go back and forth a little bit, but essentially that's how that happens in a nutshell. And some money saving tips. Just some things to consider on how you can save a little bit of money. Consider a community college. A lot of community colleges have articulation agreements, meaning that if you go to Howard Community College, we have articulation agreements with UMD, Morgan State, Bowie State, all of the colleges here. So if you go to Howard Community College or Anne Arundel or PG Community College, wherever community college you might want to consider for 2 years, then you automatically transfer into Morgan State right into your program, and you just have 2 more years left to go. And essentially what that means is they will accept all of your successfully completed credits that you completed at the community college into that 4-year institution. And if you consider way back in the chart that I showed you guys, how much money you're going to save, $4,000 compared to the $8,000, add that up over 4 years versus if you go to a community college, $4,000 for 2 years and then $8,000 for another 2 years. You're saving a whole lot of money, and you're saving yourself a whole lot of student loan debt too. Consider commuting. So say you don't want to do a community college, you want to go to a 4-year, great. Consider commuting. So you save money not having to pay for room and board. Or some people will get a whole bunch of friends together and they'll rent like a townhouse or an apartment or something, and that also can save you money. Take advantage of federal work study. On the FAFSA, it asks you, are you interested in a work study? Even if you don't know, just select yes. You're not beholden to that. Nobody's going to make you work, but just saying yes will make you automatically eligible for those funds. Take low-cost summer classes at the local community college. Again, if you just want to go to a 4-year, speak with your academic advisor at your 4-year to talk about some classes that you can take at the community college level. What that does is it will knock off some of the time spent at the 4-year and therefore cut down on the amount that you are paying. Find a school with open educational resources or rent books. So what open educational resources are essentially resources that are free for you to use, and the school provides it to you for your class, so you don't have to go purchase textbooks. And then get a regular job with the school, meaning like say you want to go to Bowie State, look and see what jobs they have opened at Bowie State. And even if it's just part-time, apply. If you can get in there, most of the times you can get free tuition. If you can't work for the school, there are other employers where you can work part-time and they will give you tuition reimbursement. And then lastly, financial aid resources. You always want to check your school's webpage. That is your first source of information. Always check the webpage because chances are questions that you have are going to be answered on that school's webpage. Then we have the Department of Education. Studentaid.gov is that central hub for everything. And they also have the 1-800 number. And then for the state of Maryland, they have the MPEC website. There's a lot of resources there. And then, of course, my personal email is tamika.bybee@gmail.com. So if you guys get a copy of this presentation, you have that. And if you have any questions, please feel free, and I mean this wholeheartedly, to shoot me an email, and I will help you guys out as best that I can based off of what I know. And that is the end of my presentation at 7 o'clock. I see we have some more questions in the chat, so I'm going to pop in here real quick. And let me back it up. Let's see. Here we go. Should the FAFSA still be filled out if you are using the GI Bill? Absolutely. So you can get both. You can get Pell Grant. You can get SELG. If you want to take out student loans, you could. And you can get, like, say you're 100% eligible for Chapter 33. So that pays off all of your tuition and fees. I've had students who were essentially living off of all of it. They were just trying to get through their education. Maybe they were in a nursing program. So nursing programs can be really demanding. So they really didn't want to work. So they used everything: the Pell Grant, the SELG, the institutional aid, the student loans, and essentially all of that money they got refunded because their Chapter 33 paid off all of their tuition and fees. So they were getting like $10,000 refunds, $12,000. I even saw one time somebody got like a $17,000 refund. So absolutely fill out that FAFSA. It will definitely help you. Let's see. Are grants free or they need to be paid back? They do not need to be paid back. Grants are completely free. The only thing you pay back are loans. How can I go back to add the codes? I'm not sure what you're referring to. The school codes. So what you want to do is you want to log back into that FAFSA to submit an update or a correction. And you can access that from studentaid.gov. And it'll direct you, like, do you want to submit an update or a correction? And you'll click in there, and then you'll just navigate to the where it asks you for the school codes. And you can also do a search. You don't need to know the school codes. You can search the school, and it'll add the school code in there when you find the school in the little search engine. Okay, so I think that's the last question. Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow, what a source of information you are. You're like a walking financial college planning encyclopedia.
Well, I try to do my part. I have a whole lot of student loan debt, so I don't want other people, go down that road.
I am telling you, you have done an awesome job. I know everyone on here has received a great information. As a parent, even as a child that's in her freshman year, there's some things that I know I need to be, we need to be looking at now for next year. So I learned something from you, and I'm so glad you put your email down there. So it might not be another student that be contacting you. It just might be me.
Please do.
But,
I mean,
yes, you have really blessed us tonight. Iota Lambda Omega is very blessed to have had you tonight, and the students that were on, they really got a wealth of information. I'm so glad we were able to tape this because there's some, for those of us that might have missed it that want to see it. I mean, your graphics, everything was right on point, and you're so engaging and energizing that it was easy to follow. So we thank you so much for being a part of our #CAP process to get the students ready, and all the tips and things that you shared are very, very helpful. So we appreciate you. We thank you for answering all of the questions. I think, okay, no, that's not a question. I just want to thank you on behalf of the chapter, on behalf of the sorority, and on behalf of the students that are going to be attending college next year.
You're very welcome. And just real quick, just a reminder, I'll be sending I have an FAQ that I created for you all, and we ran out of time, but
Okay.
I'm also going to send what's called the Pell chart, and it shows you how much you can determine how much aid you're going to be eligible for based off of that EFC. So I'm going to send
That's
that, the
awesome.
FAQ and the resources. So yeah, I'm going to send you all of that.
Okay, great. I wish I had that last year. Then I wouldn't have been standing there holding my little envelope when it came in the mail and saying, do I open this or not? Because they think I am independently wealthy, and I am so not. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So Ms. Bybee, we want to thank you again. We want to thank all the students and families that are out there watching and listening. We want to thank you guys for staying to the end. So we are going to do a drawing for a $25 gift card. So those of you who have stayed to the end, good job. Let me share my screen. And we're going to do a really quick spin, and I'm going to echo Pamela's sentiments. We are absolutely got a wealth of information, so we thank you so much. So let's spin this wheel. You got to be present to win. So if you hear your name, please unmute yourself and let me know that you're here so I can send this gift card to you all. All right, Reva Artist, are you still on with us?
Yep.
Yay.
All right, Ms. Reva. So we will use the email that was used for registration, and that will be coming to you really soon.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So am I missing anything, Tabby?
Can you put the survey in the chat?
Yes. So if you all will help us out and give us some feedback about this workshop, we would really appreciate it if you could fill out the survey that's in the chat, and then we will be sending that FAQ that Ms. Bybee has prepared to your registered email.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's it. Great.
Awesome.
I want to thank you as well, Ms. Bybee. This is great. This is awesome.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Our next workshop is scheduled for November the 3rd, and it will be ACT and SAT tips. So look out for that on the ILO social media pages and register for that as soon as possible, because we're hoping to have a great audience for that as well. November 3rd, the 4th, sorry, the 4th. So thank you so much, everyone. You guys have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.